Hello everyone and welcome to the biology lecture series, and today we'll be discussing the topic control and coordination. So in the previous lecture I've told you about the coordination, how can we define the coordination. Then we studied about the coordination in the plants, all right, where we studied about the movement, how the movement in plant takes place. Okay, then we studied about the coordination in the animals. So in the last lecture, we were studying about the endocrine glands. What are the endocrine glands? Okay, and what are their secretions? All right. So in this lecture, we'll continue the previous lecture. We'll discuss the rest of the endocrine glands. So the various endocrine glands that are present in the human body, I've already told you this in previous lecture. So these are pituitary gland, also known as the hypophysis. Then second one is the pineal gland. Then third one is the parathyroid gland. Then we have the thymus gland, pancreas, ovaries, then thyroid gland, adrenal gland, as well as testes. Now, these are the locations of these endocrine glands. So here you can see the pineal gland. Pineal gland is located here. Hypothalamus is located here. Pituitary is located here. Then you can see the location of the thyroid gland as well as the parathyroid gland, thymus gland, pancreas, adrenal gland, which is located above the kidneys. Then ovaries are present in the females and the testes, it is present in the males. Now, in the last lecture, we were talking about the thyroid gland. So thyroid gland, it consists of two lobes which are joined together by an isthmus. Now it is situated in the lower part of the neck, okay, and when enlarged it forms the goiter. So goiter, I've told you, it is a condition where the thyroid gland, okay, or you can say the size of the thyroid gland is abnormal. Clear? So two hormones that are secreted by the thyroid gland, these are the thyroxine and calcitonin, and we'll study about the roles of these glands, thyroxine as well as the calcitonin. Clear? Now let's study about thyroxine. So thyroxine, it is the principal hormone secreted by the thyroid gland, and its main role is to increase the metabolic rate of the organs and the tissues of the whole body. Okay, so it increases the metabolic rate. So what happens during hypothyroidism? The metabolic rate decreases, and during hyperthyroidism, the metabolic rate it increases. All right. So 60% of the thyroxine, it consists of the iodine, an element which is essential for the gland to enable it to synthesize its hormone. So iodine is very much required. It is very essential for the body. Why? Because in the presence of the iodine, or you can say iodine is required, okay, for the synthesis of the hormone thyroxine. Now the basal metabolic rate, also known as the BMR. Okay, so this is the metabolic rate that is calculated in the normal conditions. Now the BMR, it increases during the hyperthyroidism and it reduces during the hypothyroidism. Now let's study about the calcitonin hormone. So this hormone, it lowers the calcium level in the blood by following ways. So first, it inhibits the renal tubular calcium reabsorption. So renal tubule, it is the part of the nephron. Okay, and what are nephrons? These are the structural and the functional unit of the kidney. Okay, so these renal tubule, okay, so these are distal columnar tubule, proximal columnar tubule, and the collecting tubules. Okay, so in the nephrons, during the formation of the urine, some substances are absorbed and some substances are secreted. So there is an absorption of the calcium also, but calcitonin, it checks the calcium absorption and it inhibits the calcium absorption, all right, from the renal tubules, which are the part of the nephrons. Now it also lowers the calcium level by inhibiting the bone calcium reabsorption. Clear? Now let's talk about the hypothyroidism. So this results from the lack or the deficiency of the thyroid hormone secretion. So there is a lack of the thyroid hormone in case of the hypothyroidism. Hypo means less. Okay, so there is the lack or the deficiency. Now it is manifested differently in children as compared with the adults. Now, cretinism, it affects children and is due to the congenital defect of either absence or defect of the gland. Okay, now in this disease, growth is stunted. Okay, the features are coarse. Frequently, the child has a protruding tongue and an enlarged abdomen, and the mentality of the child is low as well as retarded. Okay, this is clear. So this happens due to the lack of the thyroid hormone secretion. Now, mixed edema. So mixed edema, this condition arises due to the severe hypothyroidism. Okay, so this arises due to severe, or it is a severe case of hypothyroidism. Okay, in mixed edema, what happens? So edema means swelling. Okay, edema means the swelling, and swelling, it occurs due to the accumulation of these substances. Now mixed edema is the condition caused by the thyroid deficiency in the adults. So it affects women more frequently than the men, and it is characterized by puffy face. So there is a swelling. So that's why the face becomes puffy. The skin is quite thick. You will have the dry cough, cold, and there will be the loss of the hairs. Now there is a deposition of mucin also, and there is fluid retention. So fluid retention also causes swelling. So there is fluid retention in the extracellular spaces, means outside the cell. Okay, and this causes the edema, and edema is the severe case of the hypothyroidism. Clear? Now, patients whose thyroid gland were not working were found to have low basal metabolic rate. Okay, so means they have hypothyroidism. In hypothyroidism, the basal metabolic rate is quite slow. And those with overactive thyroid glands, they have high basal metabolic rate, means in the case of hyperthyroidism. Okay. Now, iodine deficiency, it will cause the simple goiter. Okay, why? Because the body needs iodine to produce the thyroid hormone. That's why it is very essential to take iodine in the diet. Clear? And goiter, I have already told you. Goiter, it is the abnormal, you can say, the size of the thyroid gland. Now let's talk about the hyperthyroidism. Now this results from excessive secretion and overaction of the thyroid hormones. An excessive amount of thyroxine is poured into the blood, and the metabolism of the body is speeded up. So this hormone, thyroxine, its level increases, or there is very high secretion of the thyroxine hormone. Okay, and because of the thyroxine hormone, the metabolism of the organism is speeded up. Now the person start losing weight because the BMR is very high. Okay, it has an increased pulse rate also. It suffers from nerves excitement, and there is protrusion of the eyeballs as well. So these are the signs or the symptoms that you can see in the hyperthyroidism, which is due to the excessive secretion of the thyroid hormones. Okay, and why there is a loss of weight? Because of the increase in the BMR. Okay, because there is an increase in the basal metabolic rate. Now these toxic signs and symptoms, these are responsible for the conditions known as the toxic goiter. So you can see goiter term we are using for both hypothyroidism as well as the hyperthyroidism. Okay, the term goiter can be used for both hypothyroidism as well as hyperthyroidism. All right. Now the other names of this toxic goiter are thyrotoxicosis, exothalamic goiter, as well as the Graves' disease. Okay, so you should remember all these terms. Clear? Now let's talk about the parathyroid gland. Okay, its location also I've shown you in that image. Now these are small ovoid P-shaped glands and they lie on the posterior surface of the thyroid gland. Now usually there are two pairs of the parathyroid gland, a superior pair and an inferior pair. Clear? Now let's talk about the secretion of the parathyroid gland. So it is known as the parathyroid hormone and it has two functions. First function is it regulates the balance between the calcium in the body bones as well as in the extracellular tissue fluid and thus affecting the amount of the calcium in the blood. So the level of the calcium in the blood is also maintained by the parathyroid hormone. Okay, so it regulates the balance between the calcium in the bones and the calcium present in the extracellular tissue fluid. Now, second role, it also controls the excretion of the phosphate in the urine, probably by reducing the tubular reabsorption of the phosphorus by the tubule. Okay, so if the phosphate or the phosphates, these are not absorbed, then they will be eliminated out of the body through the urine. Okay, so again, this kidney tubule, it will present where? It will present in the nephrons. Okay, so this hormone, parathyroid hormone, it controls the excretion of the phosphate. So you can say it controls the or it maintains the balance of the phosphate or it controls the level of the phosphate. Okay, and it reduces the reabsorption. So if the phosphate is not reabsorbed into the blood, then it will be eliminated out from the body through urine. Then next, let's talk about the thymus gland. So this thymus gland, this gland is situated in the thorax, in the midline, under the sternum, also known as chest bone, in the front of the trachea. What is known as trachea? Trachea is also known as the windpipe. Okay, trachea is also known as the windpipe. Now, it has two lobes which are further divided into many lobes. Now, and it secretes the hormone thymosin. Now, the thymus gland, it is one of the sites of lymphocyte formation in the children. So, these lymphocytes, what are the role of this lymphocyte? They protect us from the germs. Okay, you can say they kill the germs, or what they do? They help us fight against the pathogens or the foreign antigens. Okay, fight against the foreign antigens, or you can say the pathogens. Okay, so they have a role in the providing the immunity. Now, recently, thymus has assumed importance because of its role in the immunological processes. So, I've told you this lymphocytes that they produce. Okay, so these lymphocytes, okay, so thymus gland, they are the sites of the lymphocyte formation. So, these lymphocytes, they are help in providing the immunity and they help us fight against the foreign antigens. Now, this thymus gland, they also help in producing the antibodies. So, antibodies, again, they are the part of the immune system. All right. And these antibodies, these also help us fight against the foreign antigens. Okay, what are the functions of antibodies? They help us fight against the foreign antigens. So antibodies, they are Y-shaped structure and they have antigen recognizing site. And what they do, they form antibody and the antigen complex. So they recognize this antigen, then they bind to this antigen and forms an antibody antigen complex. And then when this complex is formed, then after this there is another mechanism that is activated and the antigen is eliminated out of the body. Clear? Now let's talk about the adrenal glands. So these are two small semilunar structure lying one each on upper pole of the kidneys. So they are present above the kidneys. Okay, so they are also known as the suprarenal glands, means they are present above the kidneys. Okay, and they are two in number. And what is the structure? Semilunar. Okay, now they are also known as suprarenal glands. Now each gland consists of two structurally and physiologically separate parts known as the cortex and the medulla. So the adrenal glands, it is made up of cortex and the medulla. Similarly, kidneys also, the outer region of the kidneys is known as the cortex and the most inner region is known as the medulla. And adrenal glands also, it can be divided into two components or two parts. One is the cortex and another one is the medulla. Now the cortex occupies outer peripheral portion. So the outer portion is known as the cortex, while a yellowish in color, which is yellowish in color, and medulla, it is the inner brownish part. Okay, so medulla is always the inner part and the cortex is the outer part. That's why you can say outer part or the peripheral part, and medulla, this is the inner part or the inner region. Now, this cortex region of the adrenal gland, it secretes three different kind of hormone which are known as the corticosteroids. So what are corticosteroids? I've already told you these are steroids. And what were the role of this corticosteroid? So these corticosteroids, these are involved in what? These are involved in the stress response. They are also involved in the immune response. Okay. They also have anti-inflammatory property. Okay. They also have anti-inflammatory properties. And nowadays, we can artificially synthesize these corticosteroids and they have been used as a medicine, especially in the rheumatoid arthritis. Now, what are the three hormones secreted by the cortex region? Okay. First is the mineral corticoids, second is the glucocorticoids, and third one is the sex hormones. Okay, so they also secrete some amount of sex hormones as well. Now, mineral corticoids, so these regulate sodium and the potassium balance in the body. So these sodium and potassium, these are the minerals. So hence the name mineral corticoids. Now, what are glucocorticoids? So these derive the name from their influence on the carbohydrate metabolism. So glucose is a term related to the glucose, which is the carbohydrate. So they influence the carbohydrate metabolism. An example is the glycogenesis is promoted in the liver by the secretion of the hormone glucocorticoids. So glycogenesis is the formation of the glucose. Now, sex hormones. So small quantities of sex hormones, okay, which are known as the androgens as well as the estrogen. These are produced by the adrenal glands, which influence the sexual development as well as the growth. Okay, so these sex hormones, estrogen as well as the testosterone, these are mainly secreted by the ovaries and the testes. But adrenal glands also, they also secrete a small amount of these sex hormones, all right, which influence the sexual development as well as the growth. Now the adrenal medulla, we were talking about the cortex. Now, the medulla region of the adrenal gland is important in raising defense mechanism and supplementing the sympathetic action in the body. Alright, now it secretes two hormones, adrenaline as well as the non-adrenaline. Okay, so nervous system is divided into sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. Clear? But the hormones secreted by the adrenal medulla, they help in supplementing the sympathetic action in the human body. Now let's talk about the adrenaline as well as the non-adrenaline. So adrenaline, it is known as the stress hormone, okay, that causes increase in the systolic blood pressure. What is systolic blood pressure? Blood pressure that is generated during the systole. Okay, what is systole? Systole or systole. Okay, when the heart contracts or when the ventricles contract. Okay, so you can say when the heart contracts, and heart is made up of atria and the ventricles. So whenever the ventricles contract, you can say, okay, that is known as the systole. And during systolic blood pressure is generated. So whenever you measure the blood pressure, you see these two, upper figure and the lower figure. Okay, so 120, this is the systolic blood pressure. Okay, the upper one is the systolic and the lower one, this lower one is the diastolic. Okay, diastolic is when the ventricles will relax, or you can say the heart relaxes. Clear? That is known as the diastole, and during the diastole, we have the diastolic blood pressure. Now, so adrenaline, it is a stress hormone that causes increase in the systolic blood pressure. It causes the dilation of the coronary blood vessels. So the coronary blood vessels, they will dilate. Okay, so this will increase the sweating also, and it will increase the metabolic rate also. Now it brings the restlessness, muscle fatigue as well as the anxiety. Clear? Now next one is the non-adrenaline. So it is a general vasoconstrictor. So adrenaline was the vasodilator. Okay, because it causes the dilation of the coronary blood vessels. And when the coronary blood vessels, so whenever the vessel will dilate, then what will happen? The pressure will decrease. So it is a vasodilator. Whereas non-adrenaline is a vasoconstrictor, means it will contract the vessels, blood vessels. And when the blood vessels they contract, then the blood pressure will increase. Alright, so non-adrenaline, it is a general vasoconstrictor and it increases both systolic as well as the diastolic pressure. Diastolic pressure, I've already told you, it happens when the heart relaxes. Okay, when the heart relax, or you can say when the heart is at the rest between the two beats. Clear? So the cardiac cycle, you can say, is divided into systolic as well as the diastole. Now, both these hormones are helpful in the emergency conditions. Thus, they are also known as the fight or the flight response. Okay, whenever you have to, so this response is quite immediate. That's why it is known as the fight and the flight response. Whenever you are under, you can say, whenever you are under a kind of, you can say, in fight conditions, you have to respond very quickly. Or when you have to run, means you have to flight away, then these hormones are released. Clear? So that's why they are helpful in the emergency condition, whenever you have to run away or if you have to fight. Okay, so these are the emergency conditions which are required for the survival of the organisms. So next are the pancreas. So pancreas is the only heterocline gland in the human body. So why it is known as heterocline? Because it acts as exocrine as well as the endocrine gland. Okay, so pancreas is known as the heterocline because it has both the exocrine as well as the endocrine function. So what are exocrine functions? Okay, because it secretes the enzyme. So pancreas, it secretes the pancreatic juice. And what does this pancreatic juice? These contains lot of enzymes such as trypsinogen, chymotrypsinogen, carboxypeptidase, amylase, as well as lipase. So these are the enzymes that are present in the pancreas. So what are the enzymes we can write? So one enzyme is the carboxypeptidase. Okay, then we have trypsinogen. Then chymotrypsinogen is also present. Apart from this, what are present? Pancreatic lipase is present. Then nucleases are present, which helps in the degradation of the nucleic acid. Then what is present? Lipases, nucleases, and amylase is also present, which helps in the digestion of the carbohydrates. Okay, so you can say proteins, lipids, and as well as the nucleic acid and carbohydrates, these are digested with the help of the pancreatic juice. So this is the exocrine function. Now, what is the endocrine function? Endocrine function is the secretion of the hormones. That's why it is known as the heterocrine gland, because it is doing the dual function, exocrine as well as the endocrine. Now, it acts at exocrine as it secretes the pancreatic juice, which consists of the enzyme. And these pancreatic juice, this is poured directly into the duodenum. And duodenum, it is the first part of the small intestine. Okay, it is the part of the small intestine. Okay, clear? So this pancreatic juice, this is poured into the duodenum with the help of the pancreatic duct. Okay. Now the endocrine tissues of the pancreas is in the form of the clumps of secretory cells known as the islets of the Langerhans. Okay, so pancreas, they consist of the islets of the Langerhans. Now the islet cells, these are of three types: alpha, beta, and delta. Now the insulin is secreted by the beta cells, and like other hormones, it passes directly into the blood. Insulin is required to convert glucose into the glycogen. This is known as glycogenesis. Clear? And it is stored in the liver. So what is the storage product in the animals? It is the glycogen. Or you can say glycogen is the reserve food material or the storage material. You can say the storage material in the animals. Now, deficiency of the insulin due to defects in the islets of Langerhans, it results in the diabetes. You must be knowing about the diabetes. So there is a deficiency of this insulin. That's why glucose is not converted into glycogen and glucose remains in the blood. So diabetes mellitus is caused by the deficiency of the insulin, a condition where the blood glucose level is high, okay, and is passed into the urine. Now the alpha cells of the pancreas, they secrete the glucagon, a metabolic effects of which are opposite to that of the insulin. So the role of the glucagon is antagonistic to insulin. It causes the breakdown of the liver glycogen. Okay, so glycogen is stored in the liver. This glucagon, it breaks down the glycogen, thereby releasing glucose in the bloodstream. Now the third hormone, somatostatin, it is secreted by the delta cells of the islets of the Langerhans. Now it is able to inhibit the secretion of many hormones as it inhibits the release of the growth hormone of the pituitary gland. It is also known as the growth hormone release inhibiting hormone. Okay, because it inhibits the release of the growth hormones which are secreted from the pituitary glands. Clear? Now let's talk about ovaries. So ovaries, they secrete three hormones: estrogen, progesterone, and relaxin. Let's study about the estrogen. So this estrogen, Okay, so the follicle stimulating hormone from the anterior pituitary controls the secretion of the estrogen by acting on the Graafian follicles. Now, this hormone affects the development of the female sex character, and the estrogen secretion influences the follicular phase. All right, its secretion is maximum during the ovulation period. Okay, during the ovulation period. Okay. Moreover, during pregnancy, the estrogen secretion by placenta keeps on increasing till full term. Clear? Now, progesterone, it is secreted by the corpus luteum. Now, this hormone, in contrast to the estrogen, which is produced continuously during the reproductive years, is secreted only after the ovulation. The progesterone, it prepares the uterus for receiving the embryo, and it prepares the inner lining of the uterus, that is the endometrium, to receive the implantation embryo for about a week. Okay. Now, if ovum get fertilized, the corpus luteum continues to play a role in maintaining the pregnancy for the first 3 months, after which the placenta takes over the role of the corpus luteum by secreting progesterone itself. So, progesterone was secreted by the corpus luteum, but what happens later on, after the you can say fertilization, or when the ovum get fertilized, then the placenta is formed, and the placenta starts secreting the progesterone, and the corpus luteum, it will then degenerate. Now, this hormone is essential for the maintenance of the pregnancy and is therefore known as the pregnancy hormone. Now, if pregnancy does not follow ovulation, corpus luteum degenerated and breaks down due to the lack of the progesterone. The next hormone is relaxin. So, this hormone is secreted during the later stages of the pregnancy and leads to the relaxation of the muscles of the pelvic area, okay, to enable easy childbirth and reduce the pressure of the fetus. Now, let's talk about the testes. So, testes, what is the hormone secreted? Testosterone. It is the main testicular hormone secreted by the interstitial cells of the testes, and it is mainly concerned with the development and the maintenance of the male sex characters and enhancing the process of the spermatogenesis. And what is spermatogenesis? It is the production of the sperm from the germ cells. So, in germ cells, with the help of meiosis, what happens? This production of sperms takes place, and this process is known as spermatogenesis. Clear? So, till now we have discussed the endocrine glands, what are the types of the endocrine glands, and we have also discussed about the secretions. Okay, we have also talked about the hormones that they are producing, and we also discussed about the functions of these hormones. All right, hope you enjoyed this session. Okay, thank you very much for listening, and we'll discuss about rest of the topics in the next lecture.